Welcome back to GovTrigger. I'm Hilda, Atuncar, your host, and joining me today, as always, is our own Esteban Perez.
Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in with us. As always, we are more than happy to share news about politics with all of you.
Esteban, shall we start?
This news comes in from Twitter. Republican Congressman Ken Buck uploaded a picture of him and Trey Gowdy, another Republican congressman, posing with an AR-15 inside the Capitol. The caption says, "My friend Trey Gowdy stopped by the office, had to show my AR-15. And let me tell you, this tweet received some backlash."
The AR-15 has a design of the American flag printed all over it, and people were claiming that these two congressmen were breaking the law by having a firearm inside the Capitol. Eventually, the police got involved, and guess what?
It turns out that it's not against the law for congressmen to have guns inside the Capitol. Kimberly Schneider, the Capitol Police spokeswoman, stated that the district's gun laws specifically provide that members of Congress may maintain firearms within the confines of their office, and they and any employee or agent of any member of Congress may transport within the Capitol grounds firearms unloaded and securely wrapped.
And this is how Ken Buck answered to the complaints. He said, "I have a very patriotic AR-15 hanging in my office. It hangs directly above my Second Amendment flag." He also tweeted the same picture twice with different captions. The second caption says, "The Second Amendment exists to protect your God-given right to bear arms." And finally, for this last caption, he invites everyone to his website to donate to strengthen the fight against anti-gun activists.
He later explained that his AR-15 is in fact unloaded and that he has the bolt carrier assembly, which makes the gun fire, secured in Colorado. So as we all know, congressmen are allowed to have firearms with them inside the Capitol. Every day you learn something new. And this is why we take advantage of this story to bring more knowledge about the Second Amendment and its effects in American history.
The Second Amendment gives people the right to bear arms. Both the First and Second Amendments protect people from too much government interference, paired with the Fifth Amendment, which guarantees due process of law. The Fifth Amendment basically says that people have to be treated fairly. There are rules and laws outside of the Constitution that govern a person's gun rights.
The Supreme Court has established certain limits to the freedom to bear arms, and has made other limits more acceptable. For example, certain ammunition is banned, such as anything armor-piercing.
Also, FYI, California has banned semi-automatic assault weapons. There is an amendment that requires gun dealers to have trigger locks for sale. Federal grants for gun safety and education programs are set up. You're not supposed to alter the manufactured product now selling off the barrel. Overall, in recent years, the government has been trying to crack down on gun sales and regulations. But what are the limits of the government?
Well, the federal government can pass laws that even the states have to follow. For example, they can decide what kind of guns can and cannot be sold. The right to own guns comes from the Constitution. The government has to respect this because it's a right built into the foundation of government. They cannot prohibit people to own guns, but they can pass laws that say what kind of guns they can have.
We'll let our experts Maximiliano, Nino, and Karina Guerrero to discuss about the different government acts regarding firearms.
Thank you, Hilda. Well, first we have the National Firearms Act of 1934. This serves as a tax on the transportation of machine guns, short-barrel shotguns, or rifles, and silencers, so that it could stop the speed of them being circulated. The tax is for $200 in any of the firearms mentioned previously. If a person violated this, they would get a fine of $2,000 and be in prison for up to 5 years.
Next we have the Federal Firearms Act of 1938. Congress aimed this law to those involved in selling and shipping firearms through interstate or foreign commerce channels. Anyone involved in the selling of firearms was required to obtain a federal firearms license from the Secretary of Commerce. They were also required to record the names and addresses of everyone they sold the guns to, and were prohibited from selling to those people who were convicted of certain crimes or lacked a permit. This act was repealed by the Gun Control Act of 1968. However, many of its provisions were reenacted as a part of the subsequent act.
Speaking about the Gun Control Act of 1968, it revised the two acts Karina mentioned earlier. This new act established age limit to purchase firearms. It also required that all firearms, domestic and imported, must have a serial number. It restricted handgun sales over state lines, and it expanded the categories of prohibited persons to purchase firearms, such as those convicted of felonies, with some exceptions, those found mentally incompetent, drug users, and more. The key element of this act is that it outlawed mail order sales of rifles and shotguns.
Well, yeah, up until that law, mail order consumers only had to sign a statement that they were over 21 years of age for a handgun, 18 for rifle or shotgun.
That is correct. And after that came the Volkmer Act. This act greatly amended the previous acts mentioned and lessened the restrictions of sellers of firearms. It legalized sales by licensed dealers away from its licensed location only at a gun show in the same state. It limited the number of inspections of dealers' premises which could be conducted by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms without a search warrant. It prevented the federal government from maintaining a central database of firearms of dealer records, and it loosened the requirements for what constitutes engaging in business of firearms sales for the purpose of federal licenses.
In 1986, the Law Enforcement Officers Protection Act was passed. It made it legal for anyone to manufacture or import armor-piercing ammunition, or cop killer bullets, which are capable of penetrating bulletproof clothing. In 1990, the Crime Control Act established drug-free school zones, including criminal penalties for possessing or discharging a firearm in a school zone. It outlawed the assembly of illegal semi-automatic rifles or shotguns from legally imported parts. In 1994, the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act imposed a 5-day waiting period and background check run by the FBI force. A licensed gun importer, manufacturer, or dealer can sell or deliver a handgun to an unlicensed individual.
The Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act banned the manufacture, possession, and importation of new semi-automatic assault weapons and large-capacity ammunition-feeding devices for civilian use. It prohibited juveniles from possessing or selling handguns and directs the Attorney General to evaluate possessed and existing state juvenile gun laws.
In 2007, the National Instant Criminal Background Check System provided financial incentives for states to provide to the system relevant information to whether a person is prohibited from possessing firearms, including the names and other relevant identifying information of persons adjudicated as a mental defective or those committed to mental institutions. This act also changed the standard for persons deemed to be adjudicated as a mental defective or committed to a mental institution by a federal agency or department.
And now for recent years. In 2013, President Obama proposed sweeping changes in gun control. His plan includes universal background checks for gun sales, the reinstatement and strengthening of the assault weapons ban, limiting ammunition magazines to 10-round capacity, and other measures. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you. We now have learned about what the government has done regarding the Second Amendment. But what forms of discrimination are people protected from, and what is not considered discrimination in the eyes of the court?
Well, there was a case in 1939 called United States versus Miller. Miller was indicted for taking a sawed-off shotgun across state lines. He argued that the part of the Firearms Act that said you cannot transport a gun across state lines violated his Second Amendment rights. The district court agreed with Miller. The case was appealed, and the Supreme Court reversed the ruling, and Miller lost the case.
Miller claimed he was discriminated, but according to the Supreme Court, he was not, because when he filed the case, the law stated that he was not allowed to take the gun across state lines, violating his Second Amendment right to bear arms.
According to the Supreme Court, in the absence of any evidence tending to show that the possession or use of a shotgun has some reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia, we cannot say that the Second Amendment guarantees a right to keep and bear such an instrument. Basically, since there was no reason that Miller would need a sawed-off shotgun, the police had every right to arrest him for having such a weapon. This was a case where there was no discrimination, only a claim that there was discrimination.
And in 2008, there was a Supreme Court case called the District of Columbia versus Heller. Heller questioned whether his civil rights were violated because in D.C. they passed a law that all handguns must be registered, kept unloaded, and must be licensed to carry a service in a militia for traditionally lawful purposes, such as self-defense within the home.
The court determined that the Second Amendment protects an individual right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia for traditionally lawful purposes, such as self-defense within the home. It would be discrimination if Heller was denied a gun permit solely because he is not a member of the military.
And we finish on that note. Hopefully we clarified any questions any of you might have had about the involvement of government with the Second Amendment.
Once again, thank you to our experts Karina, Guerrero, and Maximiliano, Nino, for helping us to do the segment today.
No problem, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Don't forget to follow them on Twitter and Facebook for more updates on government affairs.
It's time for a commercial break. When we come back, we will discuss about the 2016 presidential election predictions.
Thanks for watching. We will return shortly.